Dr. Amrita Ghosh, you have just begun a 2-year postdoctoral position at the Linnaeus University Centre for Colonial and Postcolonial Studies. Your field is postcolonial literature focusing on partition studies, and your current project is on the literature that is coming out of Kashmir at the moment. Why is it important to study literature from Kashmir at this moment?
Well, my doctoral work on partition studies led me to Kashmir and to study the crisis in Kashmir. Since the partition of India in 1947, Kashmir has not had any resolution, and there have been multiple wars being fought between India and Pakistan. And especially since the 1990s, the situation has deteriorated and there has been intense violence, militancy, and entire Hindu community has been wiped out and forced into exile. There have been state mechanisms of subjugation and oppression over a large population. So coming back to your question, I want to clarify the literature that I'm looking at is very current and emerging. Just in the last 5 to 7 years, by Kashmiri writers all writing in English. There obviously has been a Kashmiri literature written in Kashmiri, but I'm looking at this very current emerging literature. And this literature provides a glimpse to the ongoing conflict and what happens to post-colonial identity, the larger question of post-colonial identity in this contentious space. Questions of resistance, agency, and sovereignty in a post-colonial space from both the Hindu and Muslim divide are important to look at in this literature. Also, this literature is important because it highlights the human lives in a way that is beyond the political discourse. And of course, history and politics are important, but this literature locates the human experience in a very unique and interesting way.
How should we understand Kashmir as a political and historical space? Is this a post-colonial or a decolonial or perhaps a colonial territory?
I think that's perhaps one of the most important and problematic questions when it comes to Kashmir. Again, when it comes to the literature that I'm looking at, it is one of my aims to define what it means, what post-coloniality means as a term when it comes to Kashmir, as a space of exception. And in this is a kind of a suspended space where human life and death are in this strange kind of liminality. So I think decolonial is perhaps not really a term that gains currency given what is happening right now. And certainly, again, one of the larger aims in this project is for me to see what happens to post-colonial identity in this kind of a conflict zone. I also think that the larger question of an intrinsic violence that is seeping into the psyche of a society is something that we should look at through the literature. So yes, since 70 years of independence, this is a post-colonial space, but the literature gives a notion of Kashmir as a post-colony in very interesting ways.
Kashmir is in a tug-of-war between the nation-states of Pakistan and India, and China also has a stake in this conflict. How do you see yourself negotiating this very complex political situation?
I'm deeply aware of what is going on in Kashmir, but I would like to see how these writers that I'm looking at are negotiating this. I come into this, my entry into this as a literary scholar who is interested in looking at the literature and investigating how it represents the conflict. And as I read, I find out there perhaps is an impoverishment of term when it comes to reading Kashmir as a post-colonial space. So I would like to understand and reconstruct or re-envision Kashmir as a post-colonial space through the literature. And again, my stake is not in any political camps, but to look at the literature and what it reflects in terms of the conflict going on.
An important aspect that has earned a lot of attention from scholars of post-colonial literary studies is gender. How does gender play out in Kashmiri literature?
It is one of my more current undertakings as I read through a lot of memoirs, novels, autobiographies by Kashmiri women writers writing in English, and these are very current works. As late as March of 2017, work has come out called Lost in Terror by Naima Majur, and then another slightly earlier work called The Tiger Ladies by Sudha Kaul. And I'm looking at these two works by women writers from Kashmir, and I think the gendered representation is a fascinating side where it gives to a more nuanced and layered representation of the crisis. And there is a voice of reconciliation, of hope, a kind of a hearkening to a syncretic past that I see in these gendered representations. There's also a question of agency that comes up again and again in these kind of works, and a kind of a double erasure that the women are talking about undergoing a militarization of life in their everyday existence, but also from within a certain kind of patriarchal standpoint. So, this very nuanced kind of gendered writing that I'm looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you.